Hello, and welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. Today, we'll follow the trail of a portrait of a local veteran who lost his life in World War I. The portrait of Henry Blomberg was taken down during a renovation at Old Main on the UWS campus, but the name for the portrait was lost. Years later, his identity was discovered. Teddy Moronic is going to guide us through the mystery. She is a local historian, and hello again, Teddy.
Hello, Maria.
So tell me a little bit about how you found out about this story.
Well, I spent a lot of my time while I was working at the library on local history questions, and one day I'd been asked a question which I don't even recall now, and I was back in the Area Research Center, and I can see myself, it's like a photograph. I can see myself sitting on one of the little stools that we had back there to climb on so we could reach the books on the top shelves. And I was sitting there with a pile of yearbooks from the normal school, which is now UWS, the Juvigny. And I was looking for something which I've long forgotten what it was. And my favorite thing to do with yearbooks is to go to the back of the book. That's where all the good stuff is, you know. The candid snapshots of students, the advertisements for local businesses that no longer exist, but there might be a photo of the place, and just interesting things. And I was in the 1916 yearbook, and I went to the back, and I saw a list of names. It was a chart that said senior class statistics. Mm-hmm. And there were 4 categories. One was the name. The next row said chum, the next row said activities, and the last row said destiny. And I love to look at these things because I think, who am I going to know? Am I going to know any of these people who graduated in 1916? Mm-hmm. So I went down the row where the names were listed, looking, reading all the names. Didn't really see anyone I knew until I came almost to the bottom. And there's Henry's name, Henry Blomberg. He was a senior, I don't know if you'd call it a senior since he was in a 2-year course. He was a high school graduate with 2 years at the normal school you could go on and teach. So this was his final year and had his name, and it had as his chum a manuscript, which I didn't understand. There were lots of these things you didn't, I suppose you had to be a senior class insider to understand this. Mm-hmm. And his activity was Sunday car rides. Huh. And his destiny, and this one still makes me tear up, his destiny was heaven. And that just stopped me in my tracks because the reason I knew Henry's name was I knew that the first Veterans of Foreign Wars post in Superior was named after him. And, to have a post named after you, you have to have died. Right. And here he was. It was 1916. We were only a couple years from the war. Our involvement in World War I, and his destiny was heaven. Well, once I saw that, I thought, I have to find out more about this man because how did they know that? Doesn't it seem strange that, I guess it hit me that way. I'm sure that the people who did it never thought anything about it. They probably just thought he was a really nice guy and this is where he was going to end up. But I just thought, this is like a prophecy.
Right, like a premonition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, because he didn't submit those answers. They just
wrote those down. They wrote them. Your friends always write nice things about you in the yearbooks.
Right. Okay. So when he graduated, did he go on to teach before he joined the Army?
He did. His family is rather interesting. His father came to the United States in 1864 from Sweden. Mm-hmm. And by January of 1865, he was in the New York Cavalry fighting in the Civil War. He was one of those people that someone paid to substitute for them in the war. If you didn't want to go, you paid them and they went in your place. Mm-hmm. So he fought during the last year of the Civil War. And then somehow he moved on to, I think I read somewhere, he had lived in like Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota, and then he eventually came to Superior. And I don't know where his parents met. His mother was quite a bit younger than his father, probably about 30 years, but they were married. And Henry was born in Superior, as was his older sister, Ellen. And after he was born, they moved to Aitkin County in Minnesota. Okay. His father died in 1914, and then Henry, his mother, and his sister moved back to Superior. There must have been something about the city that they liked.
Maybe they had friends or...
Yeah, they must have made friends during the time they were here. I don't know anything about that period in his life, but they came back and he enrolled in the normal school. And he was what we would call a non-traditional student because by the time he enrolled there, he was 22 years old.
Okay.
So I don't know what he did in those years before he went to school, but he spent 2 years there. He was on the debating team. He was, in fact, president of the debating club, the Lyceum Debating Club. Okay. Played football, baseball, was the sports editor of the Juvigny, and apparently very well liked in his class. And then he graduated, and he went to... The first summer after he graduated, he joined the Wisconsin National Guard, and they were organized to go down to the Mexican-American border. Apparently there was some unrest at the time, and they were patrolling down there. So he went that summer and in the National Guard and went down to Texas and patrolled the border. He came back and he taught in Virginia, Minnesota. It would have been the spring of 1917. And then he came back to Superior after he had registered for the draft in Virginia because of World War I. Came back to Superior and joined up with the National Guard again and went down to Waco, Texas to start training, even though we weren't in the war yet. So
interesting. I wonder if he knew war was coming.
I'm sure that he must have known that we were going to go to Europe, and he actually went to Europe. It was in 1918. I can't remember if it was.
So
I think
2
it was.
years after graduation, he was
in
Europe.
Over in Europe. Yeah.
Okay, and he was in France.
He was in France. They trained for a few weeks, and then they put them right into battle.
Okay.
And he eventually fought in France in they call it the Meuse Argonne area. His first really big battle was in, I believe it's called Juvigny. There was a huge fight there, and he apparently proved what he was made of by holding down the line. He captured a German machine gun, and so he could help sustain the line in the fight. And they captured prisoners of war, and for that he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, which is one below the Medal of Honor. Dick Bong also received the Distinguished Service Cross.
Okay, so we're talking a war hero.
Yeah, a war hero, yes. And then the next battle he fought in was the Battle of the Argonne Forest, and that's where he lost his life.
Oh.
And it was about 5 weeks before the war was ended.
Really?
Yeah.
So close.
I know.
Were his remains returned here, or were they buried overseas?
He's buried in France in the Meuse Argonne American Cemetery. There's almost 15,000 people buried there.
Oh, wow.
Over 14,000 died in the Meuse Argonne battles, and they're buried there. So
then his portrait was commissioned and put up in Old Main at the University of Wisconsin Superior. Do you know how that came about?
Well, I have to think that Henry was well loved by his classmates and had probably made his mark in debating circles there as president of the society. But also, if you look at the old telegrams, he's often mentioned.
Oh, really? For
stories
what?
about his debates.
Oh.
And they were well covered by the telegram in those days. So it was that group of people who probably didn't know Henry because he had graduated in 1916. And the interesting thing about Henry is he's among the first graduates who graduated from Old Main because a fire had destroyed the normal school, which UWS was first called, in 1914, in March of 1914, burned the building down to the ground. And that was the only building on campus other than Crown Heart Hall, which was the women's dormitory.
Right. Oh, no.
Every class that you took when you were in the normal school was held in that building. And so they had to scramble just to finish out that semester, too. So they used rooms at Central High School, at Blaine. They had the library and a drugstore on Belknap. And, you know, they just scrambled around. And, in fact, I think the girls at Crown Heart had to give up some of their space also. So classes could be held. So when Henry entered school for his first year, which would have been in the fall of 1914, that's where he went to school. It wasn't on campus. It was in all these various locations. But by, I think it was the fall of 1915, they had finished the school enough so classes could be held there. So when he graduated in 16, he was the first class from Old Main, the building that still stands on campus nowadays.
Wow.
And so I think it's a tribute that he had his photo placed there. But so the Lyceum Debating Club got an artist from Duluth, a Mr. Rosenkrantz, I think his name was. They collected the money to have the painting done. I think it was $300.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a
back
lot
then.
in those days. And they had a ceremony, and they presented it to the school, and it was hung in the auditorium. I don't know if the auditorium was named for Thorpe Langley at that time. I don't think so. But a little known fact about Thorpe is that I think he taught geography, but he was also an actor. So I think that's probably why they named the auditorium after him. Very much involved in community theater in Superior. So they had a ceremony, and they hung the portrait there. And I don't know how many years it stayed in the auditorium, but it was there. And then they did a remodeling at one time and took it down, and apparently the nameplate on the portrait was lost or taken off.
So they went to hang it back up after the renovation and had no idea who it was.
I don't know if they were going to hang them up again.
Oh, they weren't. Okay.
I don't believe they were. Somehow it got packed away, and it ended up in the library. And I think
in the Jim Dan Hill Library?
In the Jim Dan Hill Library on campus. And I think this is the thing that still makes me cry when I think about it, is I wrote an article about Henry for what was called the Zenith Weekly that was published out of Duluth. Was a free newspaper, and they used to run history columns every once in a while. So I decided to write about Henry. And it wasn't long after that I got an email from one of the librarians at the Jim Dan Hill Library that said, "I think we found Henry." And that it still makes me cry when I think about it. And they knew they had these unidentified portraits of people. And someone had read my story. They went and they took out the yearbook and they compared the pictures. And it was Henry.
He was found.
I know. That just makes me happier than anything I think I've ever done in all my time at the library, because we have a tendency to forget those people, don't we?
Yes.
You know, it was another time. It was another war. It was the war to end all wars, wasn't it? Except for Adolf Hitler, I guess, you know.
Right.
He was never going to forget World War I, but I thought we just do. And these people gave everything.
He signed up ahead of time knowing war was coming.
Yeah.
He said, I want to do this.
He not only gave everything, his family gave everything to this country. And I think it's just a shame that at one time someone cared about him enough to have this portrait painted. And it should always be there. And I think it will, because now it occupies a place of honor in Old Main.
Excellent. So is it still there by the auditorium?
It's on the first floor, not down in the area where I had all my history classes, but farther beyond. But every time I have a chance to go through Old Main, I stop and say hello to Henry.
Oh.
And it's just such a sad story, you know. The Telegram published a picture of his mother. His mother was part of this program. She was a Gold Star mother, which meant she had lost a son in the service.
Right.
And so at the end of World War I, the United States government decided to give these women who were wives and mothers of men who had lost their life in the war and who were buried overseas a chance to visit their graves. So the government paid their way to Europe and took them to the cemetery where their sons were buried.
Did Mrs. Blomberg go?
She did go. And the Telegram published a big story about her. She came back to Superior to visit friends after she came back from France. And there's a picture of her on the front page of the Telegram where she's next to Henry's grave. When I ran across that, that's when the tears really started, you know. And I thought, what a wonderful gesture that was for people. I don't know how the decision was made, whether you were going to bring the body back to the United States or have your son buried there. There must have been some decision, or maybe it just depended on the situation too. I don't know. But I thought, what a wonderful chance, because how would anyone, you know, during those years ever have the money to go in the time to go to Europe?
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Travel was very long.
Yeah, so, but I think she'd probably be happy that her son is back up in his picture.
Found.
Yes.
Now, the family does not live in the area you were saying anymore.
No, his mother, I think she moved to St. Paul first, and then Henry's sister lived in Seattle, and his mother eventually moved out there, and that's where she joined this organization for Gold Star Mothers. And it was from that that she got the trip organized and went to Europe with a group of women.
And then she stopped back here in Superior on her way back to Seattle.
Right,
to let
because
folks
she
know.
still had friends here in town, so she spent some time with them. So that's when the Telegram interviewed her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now when people are walking through Old Main and they
Right.
see this picture of this young man, is he in uniform?
He's in
right?
uniform in that picture. I've never seen a photo of him in uniform, but someone must have had one to give to the artist.
Right.
So it just makes you stop and think, like, what would you do if you were in that position? That was your only son. I think of Henry's mother and I think of Dick Bong's mother. You know,
Different wars, but the same
yeah,
loss.
cherished sons. You know, Dick Bong's mother getting him all the way through the war, and then he dies. And Henry, you know, he must have been her bright shining star. Here he was, recent college graduate, gainfully employed, you know, in probably a job that he would have kept forever. I could see Henry, from what I've read about him, he probably would have turned into a principal, a school administrator. He would have been someone who probably would have gone back to school for more education, and that all of that happens in that one moment when you get that telegram. And it
All of those
says
dreams.
they're all gone. And we owe it to those people not to forget them. In whatever way we can remember them, we owe it to them not to forget them. Because I don't know if I'd have the courage to do that. Would you sign up for a war? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't know. Maybe when you're young and you don't really know what it is, but
Right.
I don't know.
And you don't know how many years the portrait sat there waiting to be
No,
rediscovered.
I don't. That's a good question. It sounds like a research question for me.
There you go. I've got your homework for you.
More work to be done. I've often thought I should take like a road trip up to Virginia, Minnesota, and maybe to Aitkin to just see what I can dig up on the family from
Okay.
those days.
So he's one of those people who has stayed with you. You
Yeah.
do a lot of research. You have researched so much and so many, places, people, things. Is he one of the people who stays on your mind?
I think after I found out about Henry, I think for the first year after that, I don't think there was a day that I didn't think about him. And even now, if it's been many years, I think it was 2014 when I wrote that article about him, there's not a week that goes by that I don't think about him. And I think he needs somebody to remember him.
And you're doing that.
I don't know if there's anyone out there who does, but I'm here and I will remember him. And I will always tell his story because that's the least he deserves.
Right. Do you know if the Henry Blomberg VFW post is still active?
I don't think they are.
I know there is a VFW post in Superior, but the name of it escapes me at this moment.
Through the 1940s, because there was a state VFW convention in Superior in the late 1940s, and it was still Henry's post.
Okay. Well, it's nice because I have walked by there's pictures of chancellors and this and that and the other when you're walking down the steps at Old Main, but I have never looked for Henry, and now
You're going to
next
look
time
for
I go
Henry.
to the US, I'm going to look for
Right.
Henry.
I think they had a ceremony too on Veterans Day one year when they finally put the portrait back up. I just thank those librarians for librarians remember everything.
Words and wise. Librarians
They remember everything. And you never forget things like that. You think, oh, I think I remember seeing that. But how do those things happen? How does it go from a yearbook with a name in it to a portrait being found after all those years?
Just a strange trail of events.
I don't
there.
know. Is it karma? I
Maybe
don't know
it's
what it is.
destiny.
It must be destiny. And, his destiny turned out to be the Superior Public Library because if it hadn't been nosy me.
Right. And that's how you find some of the
Right.
best stories, some of the best
Oh.
history is by just digging, right?
I know, you're looking for something else and you come across like a bright, shiny thing there and you go, oh, that looks interesting. And I found more stories that way. Just
Well, I'm glad you do.
yes, I just love these people. My theory is sometimes we remember the wrong people and we give them too much credit and whatever. And we forget the people that we really should remember. And I guess that was my feeling a few years ago when Superior was tearing down a lot of these old buildings. And I think I not only liked the old buildings for being an old building and a historic building, but I thought that is sort of a monument to every unnamed man who worked as a bricklayer or a stone carver or a carpenter. that was their monument, and that's the only thing that we have to remember them by, because nobody knows their names. You know, those have been all lost to history. And I just think we need to remember these people, even if it's only me. Really,
Well,
you know.
Hopefully now people have listened and more people will remember
people do,
Henry.
you know.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing his story with us.
You're welcome, Maria.
Thank you for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.